Hello, welcome. Let's create a main menu in RenPy that uses images for buttons. And also let's have them positioned in an interesting way, more challenging than just one below the other. I saw this post on RenPy subreddit and thought it looked kind of cool. So I asked for permission to demonstrate how to achieve buttons that are like images, like in this picture. And I got permission to use this image. Create a new project, continue, and we're going to call this Imagebuttons tutorial. Enter, and we're going to use 1920 by 1080. It's just the resolution I like. Continue. And let's just go with any old color scheme. And it's creating a project. Alright, here it is, Imagebuttons tutorial. We are going to go ahead and open the game directory, and we're going to just launch the project to take a look at it. So this is how the menu looks by default, and we don't want these text buttons, we want image buttons, and we want the image to appear in the background. Getting the image into the background is easy. We have to just go to the GUI or GUI folder, and in here we have the main menu image. So I'm going to copy the image file to over here, and I'm going to rename the main menu image, give it underscore BAK for backup at the end, and then rename this to main menu, and see what happens now. There it is, but it's the wrong resolution. Now there are ways to scale images in RenPy, but because we will have to dissect this image into smaller pieces to have the different buttons, I'm actually just gonna scale the image in GIMP. You can use any old image editor to scale your image. I'm going to open this in GIMP. Here it is. I'm just gonna go to Image, Scale Image. I'm gonna set it to 1920 to 1080. And scale it with cubic. Again, this is just preparation for this specific image for this specific game, which has a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So if I go to scale image again, by the way, there is a shortcut that either is default or I set it, Shift S, and yes, I can see the resolution here. Now I have to zoom in and dissect these areas into different buttons. For this, I'm going to use the free select tool. And I'm just zooming in with mouse wheel. You can use any image editor, by the way. I'm just comfortable with GIMP. I will link to a video that shows how to install it. You can definitely use Photoshop. But if you end up not knowing how to do things that I show here, you are welcome to ask either how to do this in Photoshop. I'm sure other people who watch this tutorial will know. Or if I leave out some information about GIMP, just ask a question in the comments as well. So I'm going to start with the free lasso tool, and I'm going to just make a nice box that is not too close but not too far around these text labels, because it's a usability thing. You don't want it too close because, for example, you don't want the button not to be selected if the cursor is in this area between S and T. You still want it to be hovered at that moment, but you don't want it to be hovered when the mouse is over here. So yeah, just do this, make a nice border, leave enough space so the save button has also some space. You can move around these corners. And now copy with edit and copy, or Control C, and then paste with edit and paste, or Control V. And now you see in the layers the floating selection. It is important that you don't do anything, you don't click anywhere here. Instead, you have to press this, which creates a new layer. Or if I undo this, you can also go to Layer, New Layer. This is the right-click menu, by the way. Right-click, Layer to New Layer. I have a shortcut, Control-Shift-N. So now we have a new layer here. We don't see a difference because we just copied something from this layer. Let's hide that. Now we see it's only the Start button. To make this more clear, I'm going to make the original image a bit transparent with the opacity slider here. I'm going to set it to 85. By the way, if you don't see the layers section here, right click, Windows, Dockable Dialogues, Layers. Alright, so now while main menu is still selected, I'm going to make more borders. I'm going to reduce this a little. Let's go. Click, 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 etc., etc., click, click, click. And even though it is a bit transparent, you can just hit Control-C, Control-V, and then Control-Shift-N. Again, you can just use Layer, New Layer instead. So now we have the Save button. We're going to continue with the Options button. By the way, I think it should be Load, not Save, but hey, whatever. Let's continue onwards, make this one nice and tight, but not too tight. Control-C, Control-V, Control-Shift-N, and one more for the info. Click, 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 click. Control-C, Control-V, Control-Shift-N. Alright, so we have these buttons now. Now we need to export them as separate images. Before we start, let's enable the borders around layers, make them visible. We do this by right-clicking, going to View, and then Show Layer Boundary. Now the layer that we select has a yellow border. We're going to start with the Start button. We're going to hide everything but the Start button by shift-clicking on this eye. Now we're going to go to right-click, Image, Crop to Content, and now we're going to export this. We're going to right-click, File, Export As. It already has a correct folder, thankfully, because we dragged the image from this folder. And we're going to call this not main menu, but for main menu, underscore start, underscore idle. This is important because the engine, RenPy, can differentiate between idle and hovered images. If you don't use the word idle, it will become more complicated, or you will just have to add it later. So start idle. Export it. Export again. Alright, and now we undo this. Right-click, Edit, Undo Crop Image, or Control-Z. And now we shift-click on the eye of the other layer, which in this case is Save. Also click on this layer and do again the cropping. Right-click, Image, Crop to Content, and export again. File, Export As. And this is not Start, but Save. So Save Idle. Export. Export. Control-Z to undo. Shift-click to show options only. Right-click, Image, Crop to Content. I should be making a shortcut for that. And File, Export As. I could also use Shift-Control-E. I'm going to use that next time. And this is the Options button. Options, Options Idle. Export. Export. Control-Z. Shift-click here. Click on it. Right-click, Image, Crop to Content. Control-Shift-E. And this is the Info, Info Idle button. Export. If we check the folder, we can see them all in place. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we will make versions of these buttons when they are hovered. We're just going to select all these images and drag them into GIMP on this area. Then they will be opened as separate images. And now I'm going to just paint over with the paintbrush tool over here with a white color. And this is too big a brush, so I'm going to reduce the size here. Too big. 5. Yeah, 5 seems fine. Maybe too big, let's set it to 3. And that will be the hovered version of every button. Alright, so the Save button is now the hovered version. I'm just going to hit Control-Shift-E, not Control-E, or that will overwrite the old version. So Control-Shift-E. And instead of idle, this will be called hover. Save hover. Export. Export. And I will do the same for all of these as well. If we check the folder, we now have a hover and an idle version of every button. Maybe the start one doesn't look as nice. I should have used a thicker brush there, but this is just an example. Oh yeah, also I forgot, in the original image, I scaled the background, but I didn't export it. So I'm gonna export it, Control-Shift-E. And if we launch now, yeah, it's full screen. So now we have to actually start using these images instead of the text. We are going to start by figuring out where the Start button is. For that, we're going to look for the string start with an uppercase S. In the game folder, we have the script files. So I'm going to use grepwin here. I have yet to make a tutorial on that. You don't have to use it. I will just tell you where it is, but I'm going to show you my process to finding it. So I'm just going to type in start in here, make sure it's search case sensitive, and search. I have only one file, and it contains start twice. And there I see it, text button. I could also just open the screens file in Notepad, for example. I could also just get Notepad open from the start menu and then drag the file in. But hopefully you use a more advanced text editor. In my case, I use Notepad++. So, start is being used over here. Text button start, action start. First of all, I'm going to comment this out with a hashtag in front, and I'm going to make some space for the image button we're going to be using. And we will be using the image button with automatic identification of whether it's idle or hovered. That's why it's important to have idle at the end of the file name. The path of a file comes next. It's derived from its location, so the GUI or GUI folder, and then the name of a start button, which is mm_start_hover or idle.png. So this will be quotation marks GUI/mm_start_s.png quotation marks. The S stands for idle and hover. GUI mm_start hover. mm_start hover or idle. Okay. Next we need its position. For that we will have to go back into GIMP or whatever image editor you use to find that out easily. I'm going to make the background transparentish again, and I'm going to click on the layer of the start button. Even though the button is not rectangular, the layer itself is rectangular. And what we need is the location of the corner in the top left here. For me, the easiest way to find out this position is to use the rectangle select tool and start a selection from here, click and drag, and extend it to over the top left. And then I simply go to Image, Crop to Selection, which is assigned to Shift-Control-X. In my GIMP, you might have to configure this short key yourself if you want it. And that leaves me with this. And if I now go to Image, Scale Image, I will get the width and the height of a current image, which I will be writing down in another text editor, 779 and 263. And then I'll go to Edit, Undo Crop. And we'll have to do this with all the buttons. But I'm going to first do the start button. I wrote down the numbers over here. So to use these coordinates, I'm going to write here xpos 779 space ypos space 263. Okay, the start button is over here. To fix this, we're going to just comment out yalign and also xpos with hashtags in front. And we're going to save it. There it is. And now the most interesting part for this, I think, is focus mask. This means that the image will only be hovered while the mouse cursor is above an area that is not transparent, which is perfect for non-rectangular buttons. To make the hover work, we have to also add true with uppercase T, and then define the action of a button, action, start, and parentheses, just like the text button used to do. Here, action start. Let's save it. And there we go, it works now. Before we continue with the other buttons, first I want to add a click sound effect for this. I'm just going to use Audacity for that. Mouth sounds are just great. Alright, let's export this. And we're just going to use the audio folder of this game project. Click.wav. Here it is. So to make it click when hovered, we're going to add hovered to the end of this line. This is all on one line still. So hovered and then a rectangular parentheses and then play with uppercase P, parentheses open, quotation marks, sound, quotation marks, comma, and then quotation marks with the path of the click sound, which is audio/click.wav. And after that, parentheses close and rectangular parentheses close. Let's add a space for good measure. Alright, let's save it and test it. Wonderful. Now let's do it for the rest of these buttons. I have to admit we are working a bit unorganized here, because when you use these kinds of image-based menus, you will have to restructure the whole menu system anyways. For example, we don't have any quit button here, but we do have a quit button in the text button system. So the next button is save, but I think it's supposed to be the load one, because start and load are usually the options in the start menu. So we're going to replace the load text button with an image button. Over here. We're going to comment this one out, and we're going to change the action from start to show menu load. We could have just copied this to over here. And instead of start, it's going to be save. I know, we just work with what we have. And now we have to get the coordinates of this button as well. So let's do just that. I still have this rectangle for the start button, but now we want the save button. For that, I'm just gonna extend this, zoom in to make it nice and perfect. All right, Control-Shift-X in my configuration, and then Shift-S for getting the coordinates. Width and 388 height. I'm gonna Control Z undo that, and I'm gonna just finish this for all the buttons, because otherwise it would be annoying to go back and do something completely different each time. So now we have 868 and 407. Undo, undo, final button. Whoops, whoops. Undo. 8, 9, 3, and 4, 6, 4. Alright, so we're done getting these numbers, and we're just going to copy paste these numbers over here for the save button. Alright, let's see if it works. I again saved just now. Oh, well, it works, but its position is kind of messed up. The reason for this is that we are using a vbox system, which automatically places things below other things. Instead, we're going to just use a fixed system, which always assumes we are calculating from the top left of the image, of the screen. Alright, so the buttons, the text buttons are now overlapping each other and are kind of messed up. Well, not our problem, we just care about the buttons here, and save now works perfectly. So now let's also switch options and info. So I'm going to copy this. And preferences will be options. So instead of save, this will be options, and the coordinates are this and that. And instead of show menu load, this will be show menu preferences. Let's copy all this again, and now we want the info button, which is, I think, the equivalent would be about. So we're going to comment out about, put this here, replace options with info, that's what we wrote. The coordinate is 8, 9, 3 and 4, 6, 4. And instead of show menu preferences, it will be show menu about. Saving that. Alright, we still have quit and help. What I'm going to do now is hit Shift R. You can now see in the Windows title autoreload. So when I make changes to code files, it will automatically reload, which not always works, but we're going to give it a go. So let's find the help screen, text button help. All right, let's see, let's comment this out, or rather, because I think the indentation is going to cause problems, let's put the comment here, the hash, and here as well, because it would be an empty if condition otherwise. Hit Control S. Okay, yeah, it reloaded and it's gone. Only quit is left. Let's just, oh, here it is. Text button quit. So let's also comment out if we are on PC. Comment out this comment, comment out this comment, comment out this text button. Hitting Control S. And it's gone. Fantastic. Now we just need to get rid of Imagebuttons tutorial over, well, the title, and this bar on the left. Now this took me a while to figure out. If we scroll down, we can see if GUI show name, it will show the name, title, and version, and it does say version 1.0 here, but it's based on this if condition. So instead of editing this file further, I would rather just go to the GUI file and configure it there. So if we open the GUI file here, oh right, it's in options, because it's a configurable thing. So let's search in options for show name, and it says define GUI show name true. Let's comment that out, paste it, and define it as false. Oh, okay, it reloaded and it works. So this is gone. Now let's get rid of this annoying thing on the left, which I think is just the frame. Yeah, this empty frame darkens the main menu. So let's get rid of frame and the line below style, and hit Control S, and it's gone. Info, options, save, start. If we press start, the game starts. Unfortunately, hitting save keeps these buttons here. Options keeps these buttons here. Info keeps these buttons here. Now there might be better solutions to this, but my solution to get rid of that problem is to just remove the navigation screen and simply move all this by cutting it, Control X. From here, and we're gonna also comment out this, to use navigation, which is used twice, once in the game menu and another time in the main menu. So use navigation in the game menu here, we're gonna just comment that out, and in the main menu we're gonna comment that out as well, and instead paste it right below it. If we save and launch and go to save, we have to go use the return button to go back, options, return button to go back, info, return button to go back. Problem is, now in the game there is no navigation. We have to press return. As for the in-game menu, well, now that I think of it, you would actually just keep use navigation, and you would keep the screen navigation, and simply get rid of all these changes, restore the text buttons, remove the image buttons, because you would have to just create a new system with image buttons for this menu, because it works differently. It doesn't have a central point. By default, you just are in save or load or preferences. There is no main game menu. So I deleted all these image buttons and am restoring all these text buttons. There we are. Let's hope it works. Oh yeah, and we don't want this fixed. We want this to be a vbox as before. So here we are back to this kind of menu, but the main menu is still the same. Alright, well, I hope this helped. Thanks to Tyrus and Crollo for permission to use this image to demonstrate how to achieve this effect in RenPy, and maybe I'll see you next time. Until then, ciao!